In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. The next discussion, which I'm gonna talk about today, is the general ideas of language. It appears on page 13, on the top of page 13, and it is section 1.5 of page of the book, Chomsky's Universal Grammar. Well, I'm going to read some parts of this paragraph, the first paragraph, and I'm going to talk about the things that appear before and after it. Okay? Well, line 1 says, let us now put all this in the context of different approaches to languages. Okay? Or different approaches to linguistics. So there are two approaches to linguistics. Chomsky's approach is one, and non-Chomskyan approaches are another. Okay, let us see. Chomsky's work distinguishes between externalized E language from internalized I language. There are two types of language. Those types of languages, approaches to language, which look inside the mind, and those approaches that look outside the mind. Please be very careful about my gestures. Look at me and understand what I say. So there are two approaches. Approaches that look at me, inside the mind, and approaches that look outside the mind. Okay? There are two approaches, two types of theories of language. Theories of Chomsky is one, theories of others are another. So we call externalized language for those approaches which look outside the mind, and internalized language approaches were for those approaches that look inside. For short, from now on, we call these two as I language and E language. I language means internalized language, and E language means externalized languages. Okay, language approaches. Okay, now if you actually go to line 1, 2, 3, it says E language linguistics chiefly from the American structural traditions such as Bloomfield 1933, aims to collect samples of language and then describe their properties. So they go to outside the mind and collect samples, where from the society, where from the discourse, where from, let's say, books, where outside the mind, books, outside the mind, telephone conversations, outside the mind, from the movies, films, books, magazines, etc. These are outside the mind. Okay? Following Bloomfield 1933 and like this, American structuralist tradition. Okay? Any language, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any language approach collects sentences understood independently of the properties of the mind. They don't look at the mind. They look at this thing that is outside, the product that is outside, the sentences that are outside the mind. Okay? They say those are good. Chomsky says no, we have to look inside the mind. Let us see. Okay, so it says, and line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to repeat it. An E-language approach collects sentences understood independently of the properties of the mind. Chomsky, 1986. A, page 20, for example. An E-language research constructs a grammar to describe the regularities found in such samples. Okay, samples from books, samples from magazines, samples from telephone conversations, samples taken from the talk you have with your friend, talk, telephone with your friend, chat with your friend, etc. Those chats are in fact collected. And let's say those sentences are collected in order to, in fact, understand what is the grammar inside these, what are the vocabulary inside these samples. Okay, so it is like this. So e-languages constructs a grammar to describe the regularities found in such an example, such a sample, such an example or such a sample. So a grammar, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A grammar is a collection of descriptive statements concerning the e-language. The same source, page 20. Say that English questions involve moving auxiliaries or copulas to the beginning of the sentence. So when you want to make a sentence question in English, you put the auxiliary to the beginning of the sentence or the copula to the beginning of the sentence. So if I say John is here, I put the auxiliary or the copula to the beginning of the sentence to say, is John here? Is John here? This is the question. This is the question. So what do? I put the auxiliary to the beginning of the sentence or the copula, okay, to the beginning of the sentence in English in order to make a question. Okay? So how do they take these types of sentences? From outside. This is an e-language approach. Okay? So this is like this. An e-language approach looks outside in the society, looks inside the books, etc., etc. 3-4 lines to the bottom of this same paragraph, it says something like this. The linguist's task is to bring order to the set of external facts that make up language. External facts. The resulting grammar then is described in terms of properties of such data. So they say that according to our data, language is like this. Okay? Through structures, patterns, as in the pattern grammar Hunston and Francis 2000. Okay? This is one approach. This approach is an external approach. Chomsky says, no, my approach is quite different. I look inside, Chomsky says. Well, let us go to page 13, paragraph 2. I-language linguistics, however, is concerned with what a speaker knows. Look at me, look at my hand. Okay, pointing where? To the mind, to the brain, okay? What a speaker knows about language and where this knowledge comes from. Okay? It treats language as an internal property of the human mind. So if you want to actually study English, if you want to actually study Arabic, you have to go inside the minds of native speakers to say what they say, what they do not say. Okay? What they say and what they do not say. When you look inside the brains, inside the minds of the native speakers, this approach is called an internal language approach, for short, I-language. Okay? So, I'm repeating this line for you. I-language linguistics, however, is concerned with what a speaker knows, italicized, knows about language, and where this knowledge comes from. Okay? It treats language as an internal property of the human mind, rather than something external. Well, when you look at those types of sentences, the milks, etc., they are external. We have to understand, first of all, the nature of the mind, and after that, we have to say what the speakers say according to their minds. Those are the correct sentences. Okay, let's see. So, it treats language, line 2 of paragraph 2. It treats language as an internal property of the human mind rather than something external. According to this approach, language is like this. Language is a system represented in the mind /brain of a particular individual. Mind, brain. Mind, brain. There are two things. Mind is general, and brain is something inside. It weighs about 1 kilogram. Okay? المخ. Okay? Well, so Chomsky's approach, for short, look at what appears inside the mind. Other approaches look at language as something outside the mind. This is the difference as we have on page 13. So general ideas of language are of two types, external, internal. External is external, looks at e-language and collects samples from those. Internal looks inside and inside the brain, inside the moch, inside, let's say, things like that, and is considered as Chomskyan approaches. Okay, let us continue. Line 1, 2, 3, 4. Line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 says Chomsky's first question for linguistics. Chomsky's first question for linguistics sets an I-language goal. What is it? Discovering what constitutes language knowledge. Okay? So language knowledge is put by Chomsky into, in fact, challenge. Those say we don't look at it. We only look at something outside. So remember, Chomsky's approach is something internal, not external. So if you actually go to paragraph 3, there are good sentences here that I want to, in fact, review for you. Actually, paragraph 3 says Chomsky claims that the history of generative linguistics show a shift from a language to an I-language approach. The shift of focus from the dubious concept of language to the significant notion of I-language. Well, E-language is dubious. We don't like it. Dubious. We don't like it. Okay? We want I-language according to Chomsky. Okay? The shift of focus from dubious concept of E-language to the significant notion of I-language. Okay? Line 1, 2, 3, 4 says, I-language research aims to represent this mental state. Look at my, in fact, pointing finger, okay? Okay, I-language research claims to represent this mental state. A grammar describes the speaker's knowledge of language, not the sentences they have produced. I-languages looks at inside. E-languages look at the sentences that are in fact produced earlier. Chomsky says no, we want earlier sentences and today's sentences and the future sentences which are still not said, produced. Okay, we want everything past, present, and future. So if you look at language like this, you look at these three things at the same time. But e-language only looks at the past sentences that we had earlier. A grammar, line 5, I suppose. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A grammar describes the speaker's knowledge of the language, not the sentences they have produced. Well, success, line 6, I suppose. I am just continuing with the next one, next sentence, line. Success is measured by how well the grammar captures and explains language knowledge in terms of properties of the human mind. Again, you see, if you are successful, you actually look at what human mind wants to say. Chomsky's theories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines to the bottom, thus fall within the I-language tradition, not E-language tradition. They aim at exploring the mind rather than the environment. We say what is inside the mind. So, according to Chomsky, line 1, 2, 3, 4, linguistics is the study of I languages and the basis for this attaining this knowledge. How this knowledge is attained, how this knowledge is, in fact, acquired. I suppose it was one of the questions that appeared on page 11 and 12. And summarized on the top of this page. Okay, well, indeed, Chomsky is extremely dismissive of e-language. Chomsky says e-language is not good. Okay, e-language is, if exists at all, is a derivative removed from mechanisms of and of not particular empirical significance, perhaps none at all, according to Chomsky, 1991, B, page 10. Okay, so this is Chomsky's approach. Well, Chomsky's approach is something like an internal approach, not an external approach. In the next, in fact, movie, I'm going to, in fact, show you what appears to be an E-language as different from an I-language. So let us go to the next, in fact, presentation. Thank you very much. I am just finishing it just now.